Is Oklahoma indeed one of America's mystery teams? Plus, let's revisit the 2024 signing class for Oklahoma and start looking ahead to 2025 on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Josh Helmer here with you of Locked On Sooners. Locked On Sooners, your team every single day. Is Oklahoma one of America's mystery college football teams heading into 2024? Noted CBS analyst one, Josh Pate, sort of one of the spokespersons, I guess, now of college football, 24/7 sports as well, Josh Pate. He every year comes out with his group of mystery teams, and Oklahoma made that list heading into the 2024 college football season. Just to give you a lay of the land, and not that Oklahoma has every bit in common with these other three teams, but the other three mystery teams for Josh Pate were Penn State, Louisville, and Colorado. His rationale: why is Oklahoma one of America's top mystery teams? Well, it's the offensive line. It's an offensive line that replaces all of its five starters. Yes, we can say Jacob Sexton was a starter a season ago, but at least where we began things with Tyler Guyton, Savion Byrd, Andrew Rame, McCade Mettauer, Walter Rouse, and then how we finished things for a large portion of it at guard with Caden Green. The five starters for Oklahoma are effectively gone. Now, Jacob Sexton, yes, made a couple of starts a season ago, and it's not to house a lot of promise for Oklahoma now and going forward. But it's a reasonable discussion to be had. And the question, again, that Josh Pate was asking was, can one position group, can your concerns, well, if you want to call them concerns, can your questions about Oklahoma's offensive line, do you have enough faith and strength in the program that Oklahoma overcomes perceived shortcomings or possible shortcomings with this offensive line? Or is that enough of a problem, enough of a hang up for you that you're out on Oklahoma heading into 2024? Basically, I guess we just ride the fence here if you're Josh Pate, which is, that's why it's a mystery team for Josh Pate. Oklahoma's offensive line, there's enough unknowns there that it's at least cause for concern, or at least worth taking a pause for consideration. We know by now, if you're an Oklahoma fan, the Sooners in-house, you've got Jacob Sexton, who we discussed, Logan Howland, Jake Taylor. Those are names that possibly you're looking for to take big steps forward. Heath Ozaida, a recent signee. Troy Everett could be your starting center. Joshua Bates, another signee in the 2023 class for Oklahoma. Is he ready to step in and start at center or at guard for OU? Don't really know. We know that probably Jacob Sexton is one of your starting tackles, and then we go from there with the aforementioned in-house names and the list of signees. Eugene Brooks, a lot of late buzz on Eugene Brooks. Eddie Pierre-Louis, some legitimate hype around Eddie Pierre-Louis, but those two guys, and those would be, I think, the signees in this class for Oklahoma in 2024, where there feels like there's the most day one buzz for those two possibly stepping in and helping Oklahoma. Beyond that, you signed Isaiah Autry, Daniel Akinkunmi, and Josh Isosa. So that's the in-house. Those are the signees in 2024 for Oklahoma. Now we know the Sooners got busy out of the transfer portal and brought in a lot of starts, brought in a lot of snaps. Fabechi Wiwu, Gary and Hatchett, those two probably slotting in offensive guards for Oklahoma. I think Wiwu is going to start for OU at one of the guards, and Gary and Hatchett, I think, has a great chance too as well. Fabechi Wiwu, to jog the memories out there, freshman All-American at North Texas. And remember, Seth Luttrell, Oklahoma's new offensive coordinator, he was a big part of recruiting Wee Woo to North Texas. 20 starts over the last couple of seasons with North Texas. Let's round up and call it 1,600 snaps for Wee Woo over the last 2 seasons. Gary and Hatchett was injured for part of this past season on the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line at Washington. He didn't start throughout the season, even injuries aside. He made 4 starts last year with Washington, has appeared in 25 games over the last couple of years for Washington. So injuries were a problem last season for Hatchett. And again, he was a part of a talented offensive line, Joe Moore, award-winning offensive line at Washington. But he's experienced. He's played a lot of college football. That's 25 games that he's appeared in. And oh, by the way, again, the 4 starts a season ago. Offensive tackles. OU went and supplemented out of the transfer portal there as well with Michael Tarkin and with Spencer Brown. Those two, a combined 53 starts over their collegiate careers and a combined 2,500 snaps between the two over their collegiate careers. So we're going to see how it all comes together. It's sort of been, from my vantage point, typical of a Bill Bedenbaugh offensive line to not come out of the gates with everything totally ironed out early. And that's probably not a unique to Oklahoma situation, but that's been the tale for Oklahoma the last however many years you want to say. It's typical for Oklahoma to play its best football up front back half of the season, which is what you want. But at times, and especially last year, you think about the run game, Oklahoma was, I think it's fair to say, vulnerable in the front half of last season. Now you're embarking into the SEC. And how well is all of this going to come together? The in-house, the signees, the transfers, and how quickly? If it follows that general Bill Bedenbaugh trajectory, then okay, to me, the most imposing part of your schedule on paper is that back half of the schedule with the trip to Missouri, with the game here versus Alabama, with the trip to Death Valley for LSU. So the most challenging games on the schedule appear to be in that final stage of the season, but obviously you've got Texas at the Cotton Bowl midway point of the season. You've got Auburn early on the road in the season. You host Tennessee, first SEC game. That's a talented Tennessee squad. They're sort of, we don't know kind of what to suspect about Tennessee entirely, outside of we think they're going to be pretty good offensively. And maybe Oklahoma, if the offensive line comes together, if Jackson Arnold doesn't make a bunch of mistakes early next season, that defense for Tennessee, you ought to be able to go hang points up on them in Norman. So to me, I look at it, and the phrasing mystery team is sort of interesting in general, right? Oklahoma, I don't have a big beef with Josh Pate or anybody calling Oklahoma a mystery team. Really, Josh Pate has been a supporter for Oklahoma publicly for the most part, I would say. You see him out there talking about Oklahoma and Texas. Don't expect them to come into the SEC and be this layup for everybody else in the Southeastern Conference. No, Oklahoma and Texas are going to go into the SEC, and all of a sudden, some of those teams that thought they were middle of the pack to that second tier below the top tier, well, now maybe you're coming back down the ladder a little bit because Oklahoma and Texas are jumping in to knock you down a couple of rows on the ladder. Josh Pate's been that guy kind of singing that song about Oklahoma and Texas, and yet he refers to Oklahoma as one of his mystery teams here because of the offensive line questions. I would just look at it and say what I've said a lot of occasions here on the Locked On Sooners and Locked On Podcast Network. To me, everybody's sort of a mystery team in the SEC beyond Big Bad Georgia. You got Georgia up top that we feel like with Beck and company, we know what we're going to get. That's the clear team that everybody's hunting after in the SEC. And then beyond that, okay, Alabama, I still think is going to be really, really good. But sure, I'm like a lot of people out there. I want to see what Alabama looks like in year one with Kalen DeBoer. How does he answer those expectations? Look, took Washington to a national championship game, but now you're at Alabama, where they've been winning national championships after national championship and playing in national championships and been the standard bearer of the sport of college football. How do you respond to those expectations in year one and beyond? I don't think it's some surefire thing that Jalen Milroe and DeBoer and company, that they're just the beast of the SEC again, now and going forward. I have questions with Alabama. So Alabama, who's been a staple in the SEC, to me has questions. Tennessee, I think a lot of similarities to Oklahoma in the sense that you're both quote unquote breaking in younger quarterbacks, 5-star super talented quarterbacks, but younger quarterbacks. Texas replacing a lot of skill talent. That would be the team, admittedly. Texas would be the team after Georgia for me that I look at and say, okay, this on paper is the team that should contend for an SEC championship, but Texas is replacing some big guys up front defensively. They're obviously replacing a bunch of the skill talent. So really outside of Georgia for me, everybody in the SEC is a mystery team. Recruiting. How does it look for Oklahoma in 2025? How is it shaping up? Let's hear from Brian Smith and plus his thoughts to start on the 2024 class for Oklahoma as we revisit it. How do we feel about it now that we've let it simmer a little bit? And what are some of the big storylines in 25? Let's find out from Brian Smith, our resident recruiting expert, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network next. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel. That's America's #1 sportsbook because, hey, right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more. Head on over to FanDuel.com/locked on to shoot your shot. A couple of the interesting numbers out there from FanDuel Sportsbook already on Oklahoma, and there will be more as the weeks and days and months progress. But Oklahoma, a 9.5-point underdog to the Texas Longhorns in the Cotton Bowl next season. If you're like me, you probably like getting 9.5 points for Oklahoma in that game, considering, I don't know, they beat Texas last season. Also, the over-under win total for Oklahoma, 7.5. So if you've got a strong feeling, maybe now head on over to FanDuel. That's FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Joined by our resident recruiting expert right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, Josh Helmer with Locked On Sooners, joined by Brian Smith, again, of the Locked On Podcast Network. This, your team every single day right here, Locked On Sooners. Well, Brian, what a 2024 haul it was for Oklahoma. Before we turn the page to 25, and I'm sure, obviously Oklahoma, a fast start in 25, and many programs a fast start in 25. They've already turned the page to 2025. But for us, the season now is in the rear view, and now it's really sort of time to turn our full attention to 25, if you will. But let's spend a moment just revisiting Oklahoma's 2024 class. It was a great class for Brent Venables and company. What did you like about it for OU?
Two things in particular. They got faster and they met needs. D-line was a priority, not only because originally, at least, David Stone is from the state of Oklahoma. There were some key Oklahoma recruits that were on the D-line. Okoye was one of them, kind of a weird deal. He was a homeschool kid. I think he's intriguing. They got a certain young man out of Melissa, Texas, that every school in the country recruited. They recruited their home base, got the kids they needed in general, and they happened to be at a position of need. I mean, those are winner, chicken dinner. Secondarily, look, the running back room not only got bigger, it got really fast. Tatum is just, holy cow. When he hits the corner, it's bye-bye. There's always room for more guys like that in your offense, and they need more explosive plays that don't come from a quarterback. This guy's like, my dude's better than yours. If you don't double him, if you don't scheme against him, we're going to beat you. When Venables was at Clemson, they always had one or two guys at like flanker or receiver, running back, that just murdered people in one-on-one situations. Tatum's that kind of guy, in my opinion. And I'm not taking anything away from other guys they have or anything, but like he's shot out of a cannon. So now the question is, how do they get him in the lineup without screwing up the depth chart and ticking off older guys and transfers? It's a tricky situation with today's portal, but there's no way he's going to sit the bench either. In some ways, if he paves out a spot for himself and they leave, to hell with it. It just is what it is. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if he started by the end of this next year because he may get 1 yard, 2 yards, 3 yards, and then he'll hit 50. Those kind of guys change the playbook, brother. So Oklahoma did some things they needed to. They won battles against Texas, LSU. If they can do that consistently, they can move into the SEC, which is something we'll talk about here in a little bit. But I think it's a great start. So very good class by Venables in his staff.
The defensive line, of course, has drawn a number of the headlines. David Stone, probably you with us and a number of other shows. It's been a long, long time talking about where's David Stone going to wind up in the 24 cycle. Well, it was eventually all roads leading to Oklahoma, his addition for the Sooners. How quickly do you think he's going to impact things for Oklahoma just individually? What does he mean to OU as they move forward?
He's a little more advanced than even I had thought when I was talking with David at Under Armour and just watching him work out at the All-Star game. He takes it very seriously on how he uses his hands and mixes up moves and stuff. He's more mature as a football player than most guys. I think he can play right away in obvious passing downs. It's always the question with D tackles. He's 285, something like that. Can he handle the run on 1st and 10? I don't know. He's really strong, and he's been through ING's program, which, believe me, is different. I worked there, and they've got 2 weight rooms that are NFL level, literally. So how much did he use it, and is he still using it the way he should? I don't know. But on 1st down, if he can just be a little bit of a help. 3rd and obvious passing downs, Dave's going to play. The other guys are going to have to make way. There are very few humans with his quickness on a passing down situation that can play inside. And David's athletic enough to play 5-tech. The strong side DN. He's that kind of athlete. They're going to put him on the field and do different packages. Of course, Venables is famous for 3-man line and 1-play-4. He does all kinds of stuff. How David picks it up will be a little bit of that. But again, very sharp and astute young man. He's going to play, man. He's a dude.
We were chatting before we started rolling here today, and you said, well, who else do you like in this 24 class for Oklahoma? And I said, the first name that I told you was, well, Jaden Jackson. That isn't sort of, I guess, as highly thought of. He started receiving a little bit more of those flowers as the cycle went on, but I just think he and David Stone as a tandem, when you've seen those two obviously at IMG, but in some of the all-star games as well, or showcase games as well, they just seem to work so well as a tandem together. What have you seen from Jaden Jackson and his addition for Oklahoma? What do you expect him to add for the Sooners?
That's one of the hardest working kids I've ever seen in recruiting. There was a Polynesian Bowl group that came out to IMG last year. On the same day, there was another event, and I got there early, and I'm just jacking around. And it's a bunch of kids that are decent players. And I'm like, what the hell is Jaden doing out there? He doesn't have to – he can go whatever he wants, right? And he's out there working as harder than anybody else on really fine-tuning technique, setting the edge, mixing up moves and all this. And, like, he took in everything that the guys were teaching him. And I'm like, this guy gets it. And he was already a really good player, and everybody had, 30 offers. So I'm like, would you add that mentality? And he fits Venables to a T. Not the tallest defensive tackle, but ultra quick, great technique, and gets up the field. When you got guys like that, it's hard to keep them sitting on the bench. And I think that you're right. As a 1-2 punch, because David's going to get the double teams. He's going to. He's the elite talent. But Jaden one-on-one is not going to be fun, especially if he's with the center and he's got to snap first. So rotating those guys in, and I don't expect Jaden to start right away necessarily, but I bet you he plays quite a bit. And I bet you by the end of his sophomore year, he is a starter somewhere in there. Could be him and David. I don't know how all they'll use David, probably moving him around. But that's a guy that's going to play for multiple years for Oklahoma and probably start multiple years too.
The skill guys in this class for Oklahoma, it's not unusual. I feel like I've said it until I'm blue in the face, Brian, that I'll worry about skill guys at OU when it's proven that there's something to be worried about with skill guys at OU. And yet years go by and guys graduate or they go to the NFL draft, people transfer, and all of a sudden it's, okay, well, who's going to fill this spot in the receiving core, in the backfield? And generally speaking, it's typically not a problem for Oklahoma. And that's because of names like Tatum, who we touched on, but also a Zion Kearney and a Devon Mitchell and Zion Reagans. I assume you're fairly familiar with Reagans, the skill guys in this class. What do you make of that group of guys for Oklahoma?
Again, it's about balance. Reagans, for somebody that hasn't seen his film, I don't know if it's in his best interest to play football. I wonder if he should just concentrate on being a 60-meter runner. There's nothing wrong with putting on spikes and telling Adidas, I'll gladly cash your checks. You know what I mean? Like, he's that kind of speed. He's not the biggest dude. He's kind of a jackrabbit. Probably not going to be a volume guy because he's not the biggest and don't want to take a lot of hits. But at 150, 160, he is shot out of a cannon. He might be faster than Tatum. So when you put those kind of guys together, like if you go double slots with those two, and then the defense is in a base defense, there's going to be problems. You might see a lot of timeouts. They create problems. That's what Clemson did, and I think Venables is just trying to copy what Dabo did offensively. He'll do his own defensive deal. But look, that's the kind of guys that killed everybody in the Big 12 for the last 15 years at Oklahoma. They always had a slot receiver that everybody on the pregame show said they got to find a way to slow this guy down. And you look up and he has 8 catches for 112 yards. You know what I mean? It wasn't necessarily the greatest average. They run a couple of screens, but he had a touchdown in the end zone, and he made 2 guys miss on a short pass and ran 25 yards for a score, blah, blah, blah. And it's the same thing over and over. Reagan's will fit that, and they got some other guys with a little more size to kind of balance it out. And then you still got Tatum in the backfield. You can catch. You can throw screens too, and he could probably play in the slot a little bit. It's going to be a dynamic offense. And now that they're moving to the SEC, if you don't have a dynamic offense, you have 0 shot. Because even teams score points on Georgia and Alabama now. Trust me, I've seen them for like field level. That's a different deal. So Oklahoma had to get these kind of guys. And there's, Reagan's is a kid from Georgia. He knows what it's like to play against those kids. They're going to play early. They got a really good skill group coming in.
You almost anymore have to mix transfer portal additions into the recruiting classes.
Yeah.
I know that generally speaking, for our purposes, okay, we're talking 2024 signing class or obviously 2025 commits and then the eventual signing class. But for Oklahoma, we were chatting before we jumped on here that the Sooners offensive line, I mean, they're totally retooling the thing. They basically have one guy back now. They went and they got a Garion Hatchett out of Washington. They went and got a Michael Tarkin. They went and got a Spencer Brown from Michigan State. And breaking script a little bit here on you, Brian, but just big picture, because I know that you're connected to especially coaching staffs in the Southeast. You talk to a lot of these collegiate coaching staffs. How important has the transfer portal become? And just philosophically, in your mind, can you be successful if you have to build an entire offensive line, say, out of a transfer portal, or at least find 2 or 3 starters out of the transfer portal? How do you sort of think about that when obviously we were told, right, that the lifeblood of the program needs to be the recruiting class, the signing class, and yet for Oklahoma, they're kind of having to find a couple of guys out of the transfer portal?
They're in an in-between year. I don't think this is the norm, and I highly doubt that you do either, Josh, but you got to make do for the year. Do I think Oklahoma is going to the SEC title game? No, I do not. It'll be one of the reasons they're not. If they have any injuries, they're already going to be less cohesive. That's a big problem. But once you get through spring with some of these guys, you go through summer, it'll get better. And, I mean, is there a better O-line coach than the one at Oklahoma? If it's going to work, it would, maybe there is, but he's in the conversation top 3. I will have my faith in him until otherwise proven. He still doesn't have that one dude that you're talking about, that elite guy, as the coming back and like, okay, this guy's going to be an Outland Trophy guy or whatever. You know what I mean? That would be nice, but they can get by. And their quarterback's going to be mobile. They're also going to have a lot of skill guys. They can do quick game to mitigate it. I'm just worried if they have any injuries. And that's why, like, I talked to a coach recently. I said, is there anybody you're going to take out of the portal? This is right before it opened up in December. And he's like, he turned and looked at me and he goes, there's nobody in it right now that I would take that I've been told about. Like, he gave me this look of just dread. O-line, everybody needs. D tackle's the other spot. I don't think there's many guys that Oklahoma is going to be able to get. Like, the next portal window is the 16th to the 30th of April. There might be 1 or 2 guys. Maybe, if they're lucky, they could get. So, it's got to work with what they got. And they need to make it a 1-year deal because O-line takes forever to build. It's 2-3 years at a time. And if it doesn't go that way, you're in trouble. So 1 year, man, make it through. And you got the right guy to do it as an O-line coach.
Coach Beanbo, very highly thought of. Well, you teased maybe a little bit, but how SEC ready is Oklahoma based on the way they've been recruiting here of late? Let's dive into it next. Keep it dialed in right here on Locked On Sooners. Looking for last-minute tickets? check out the Gametime app. That's right. Download the Gametime app today where you can use code LOCKEDON for $20 off. The Gametime app, it is seriously awesome, everybody. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy. That's right. You can see your sight line from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what you're purchasing. You can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Taking a peek at some of the upcoming Oklahoma City Thunder prices. Miami Heat at OKC. This is March 8th. You can get tickets as low as $19. The Memphis Grizzlies at OKC. Tickets as low as $2. And OKC versus the Dallas Mavericks. Tickets ranging from as low as $11 and counting. The Utah Jazz, $6. That's with the Gametime app. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Hanging out with our recruiting expert right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It is Brian Smith. You can follow him on the app X, formerly known as Twitter, at FBScout_Florida. Based on the way the last couple of years have played out for Venables, recruiting classes, signing classes, it's opinion season, right? Everybody's got one now. We're in the off season. You see, a lot of the chatter that we sort of hear around here is in this past season would be fair to arrive at that conclusion is that Texas is more SEC ready than, say, in Oklahoma. Now, Oklahoma is 1 year behind in terms of Venables got hired 1 year after Steve Sarkisian, so he's kind of starting to really get all of his guys on campus. But in your mind, where is Oklahoma at? Are they SEC ready in 2024?
I'll say no because of what we just talked about, the depth concern I have at O-line. Like you, I'm not worried about skill. I like the young quarterback a lot. I've met he's a great kid, by the way. They'll be fine there, and they got a great coaching staff. Depth in the SEC is the difference between winning and losing. If you look at the teams that finished almost, you know who they are, the top of the SEC every year, those are the teams that pick the kids they want out of the portal, and they recruit. Out of the top 300 kids, there are about 5 schools that get 50 to 60 of them. It's just the way it is. LSU, Alabama, Georgia, those are at the top. A&M to a certain degree has been at times, although they've squandered that miserably. And they're the ones that at the end of the year, even if they have attrition, are still able to win. I'm worried about Oklahoma on the back end. Like the first 6 to 8 games this year, I bet Oklahoma's borderline top 10 team. I want to see what they can do 9 through 12 because if they have any O-line attrition, that gives me some pause. And I like, again, I know them. Maybe I'm biased. You like Stone, Jackson. I know them. I think they're going to come in and help. You don't want D linemen as freshmen, especially interior, like being guys. I hope they have enough guys in spring ball, and maybe they will, that those kids can just be pass rushers, special situations, and you're not playing them. Even like Tatum, I love. I still don't want a freshman being the guy on opening day. I'm sure Oklahoma would rather not do that as well. If you can be that program in the SEC, you're okay. 8-4 to 10-2 is possible, but I mean their schedule's not friendly. You know, even like they play at Auburn. I cover Auburn. I can tell you right now that place is bananas no matter what they do. If it's a gymnastics meet, the Auburn people come out. They do not care. It's a hard place to play, and that's a team that's probably not as good as Oklahoma, but it'll be bonkers. The difference is going to be the defensive talent and the depth they're going to see in the SEC. So the margin of error is really thin.
Everybody's probably asking you about Michael Fusi or a lot of programs. A lot of shows 100%. Asking you about Michael Fusi. What do you know about him, and where do you think Oklahoma stands in the process?
Oklahoma is allegedly the team. I don't know him personally. Being a Texas kid, that's one thing, but like you watch his film, and I happened to watch it again today. Another show asked me about him that I did today. I know you're shocked by that as well. So, yeah, I mean, his list is pretty broad, but it's also got some of the typical contenders. You got Missouri, which is kind of they're the upstart in the SEC. LSU, A&M, Oklahoma, Texas, Florida. It's not really shocking. Left tackle, right tackle, doesn't matter. Size to come in and play right away. He might be a kid like Oklahoma. If they sign him, I mean, their O-line depth chart's not exactly where they want it to be. He could compete for at least a backup role in freshman year. Playing for Beaton Ball is a little different. He's not going to just throw a freshman in there. He has certain standards that he should hold to. But elite player, man, top 100's conservative in his offer list. Like, don't take my word for it. Take Oklahoma, Texas, Florida. You know, I'm pretty sure Georgia's offered him. They know a thing or two about O-line play. His list is ridiculous for a reason. God gifted him, and he's got the natural size to play tackle or guard. It doesn't matter. He's just a really good prospect.
The in-state commits for Oklahoma in this class, I mean, and really just the regional commits. You look up and down, 10 commits for Oklahoma and 25 right now. And, well, the bulk of them, really all of them, are from Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas. What do you make of Oklahoma's 2025 class so far?
I love it. This is how Oklahoma should recruit. Now, there comes a point, I don't know if you know the number they're looking to get to, because the transfer portal makes it impossible. It used to be, like, I'd ask a staff, where you want to be, 22, 20? Like, they would know within, like, one guy how many recruits they were going to take. Hell, I can ask somebody that I know personally on a staff in November, and they may not know because they got 5 or 6 guys they know on their staff or on their roster. They might be gone. So that changes their number. With that said, they need to have at least 5 more guys that are at least borderline top 100 added to the class to be OU of old. If you want to be a playoff contender, not be seeded 10 through 12 and get blasted because you're playing a road game at Penn State or Michigan or something, you need to have those elite kids at the end. A big time. They need a big time corner. Like the guy that walks in, you know he's going to play. They need a big time receiver. This, the obvious things, and you got to wait to the end. I'm sure Venables will figure that out. He's done it forever. He's an excellent recruiter. They'll get that. But if they just save a few for the national kids and they continue to recruit, like they're killing it in Oklahoma. I thought the last staff didn't do a good enough job in state. That's just my opinion. They're doing it now. Like the quarterback's a good kid. He's going to wait. Like he might wait 2 or 3 years to play. How many kids do that? In-state kid in Oklahoma, it means a big deal to put that OU on your shirt. So I think they're taking the right kind of kids that'll be system players, and they can still play too. But you know what? They still got to get a few of those elite kids at the end, and you got to wait for them. That's everybody has to. So we'll see how they do at the end.
2 more. I know you got to run. The network keeps you very, very busy. What are the big stories you're following in 25? Offensive line looks strong. I know we talked Fusi, but it's across the board. What are sort of a couple of the big stories in 25?
O-line is a big one. This is a ridiculous year for tackles, especially in the Southeast. I know it's the same story over and over, but you could fill 2 or 3 O-line classes just from like the states of Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama. I know nobody wants to hear that because those aren't easy places to recruit, but that's, those are the kind of states they're from. And you also have another great D-line class from a similar area. My concern is that Georgia is going to get about 90% of them. The Alabama-Georgia area, even more so than ever, especially with Kirby not having to do with Nick. That's something I'm worried about. Georgia could have an all-time class again. That's not good for any of us. But Justice Terry and Elijah Griffin are names you're all going to hear. Might be the 2 best D linemen in the country. They're both probably going to go to Georgia. That's not good for business for anybody. And they're probably also going to get Juju. So the whole Georgia thing's its own entity. And then finally, it's year 3 for a lot of coaches. SEC, plus Mario Cristobal at Miami. Needs to keep things going on the recruiting trail because he's not always been the greatest game day coach. You have Billy at Florida. Does he even make it to the Georgia game this year? That changes recruiting because some of the kids we're talking about now, like Fusi's looking at Florida. If they start out 3-5, how likely is it that Florida's still in the middle? Like these things change because a lot of coaches are probably going to get the hatchet this year. The SEC is just part of it. So recruiting is very fluid and it's deep, deep SEC roots. The talent's there. So maybe Oklahoma steals a few more kids out of that area.
Brian, in closing, I think you're a great resource to ask this question to. The Big Ten and SEC commissioners are putting their minds together on a number of different things. And anyways, Sankey recently, one of the items that he mentioned was that, okay, his proposal is we get rid of the transfer portal opening in December, and then we move up signing day. That way it doesn't conflict with, well, the playoff itself going forward, and they dead period to begin the month of December. That and just recruiting in general, do you have anything you'd like to see changed on the recruiting calendar?
Unfortunately, there's no good answer because the playoff, the way it is, you can't. Like I told this to somebody the other day, high school coaches are going to hate it coming back because, like in Florida, it ends Thanksgiving and then in the first week of December, whatever. Having signing day before you're playing like the semifinal game to go to the state finals is horrendous. So there's a lot of problems with that. And these coaches aren't going to be able to have kids taking visits right before the end. And it's going to be a conundrum. I don't know what you do about that. There's no good answer. The portal one is the other thing, though. They try to have them at the end of semester so kids can go from one school to the next, blah, blah, blah. How do you move that and make it better? Is it even possible? Having just one, I see it, but still, and this is a Congress bigger picture, it does not work to have unlimited transfers, and it does not work if they don't have to sit out. I know nobody wants to hear that, but because everybody's cheating to get kids, it opens up other doors when you do that. It makes it even worse. So those, I think they're just trying to put a Band-Aid on a waterfall that is coming down on the NCAA and college football and athletics in general. So I don't think either one of them will help much because they'll find another way to screw it up because they don't police it.
It seems that way. Brian, hey, thank you for your insight on OU. We appreciate you joining us as always.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
That's Brian Smith. Follow him again on the socials at FB Scout _Florida. I'm Josh Helmer. Until next time, everybody, Boomer Sooner.